Earlier this morning, we heard from General John Allen, the commander of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan. He testified before Congress last week for the first time in his current role on Friday. We sat down for a wide-ranging interview on the future of American involvement in Afghanistan. Tell me where you see the effort in Afghanistan today.
Well, I think we've come a long way in the last several years, and in particular over the last couple of years. We're seeking to move the Afghan National Security Forces ultimately into the lead as our partners in this counterinsurgency. And piece by piece, the terrain of Afghanistan, the people of Afghanistan, secured by the security forces of Afghanistan, will continue the progress of moving towards full transition.
Many people look at the relationship on that question and say there's corruption in that government. And whether that government can provide the kind of leadership that would enable them to meet their commitments to their own security.
Mm-hmm. There is corruption in that government, and President Karzai acknowledges it himself. And I think that's a very good going-in position, frankly. He talks about partnering with us. He talks about working within the Afghan government to eliminate a culture of impunity.
Can you achieve the mission without being able to deal with that corruption in a significant way?
Well, we are dealing with the corruption, and we can accomplish the mission dealing with it, but we won't solve it all at the same time. It's going to take time.
And at the pace of the Afghan forces being able to take the responsibility, you believe that by 2014, when American forces are essentially withdrawn, the Afghan force will be able to stabilize Afghanistan and prevent a Taliban takeover.
By the end of 2014, it is the end of the ISAF mission. I believe that the ANSF will have completed security transition by the end of 2014. They won't be alone. We will still be there in some number, to be determined, which will continue the process of the professionalization of the Afghan National Security Forces and the improvement of their capabilities.
What happens if we're not there? And is it possible that this is a place that Americans shouldn't be dying for somebody else?
This mission is essential in ways that perhaps in other conflicts have not necessarily been apparent. There is a direct line relationship between what happened in Afghanistan in the work up to 11 September 2001 and what we're doing in Afghanistan today.
Al-Qaeda does not have a strong presence in Afghanistan today, and many of the leaders of Al-Qaeda have been killed, including Osama bin Laden.
It remains a virulent organization, even in small numbers, because the planning doesn't necessarily require large numbers of people to execute. The execution can come from somewhere else. We don't want the Taliban to put down roots or the Al-Qaeda to put down roots in Afghanistan that can facilitate Afghanistan becoming once again a launching pad for international terrorism.
Here is a quote from the New York Times by two respected reporters, Helene Cooper and Eric Schmidt. Quote, "The Obama administration is discussing whether to reduce American forces in Afghanistan by at least an additional 20,000 troops by 2013, reflecting a growing belief within the White House that the mission there has now reached the point of diminishing returns."
I've had no indications from the administration that they desire a particular number. In the aftermath of my mission, which will be to return the 23,000 troops, the remaining surge troops by the end of September of 2012.
What do you worry about the most?
I worry that the complications from these recent events can distract us from the larger strategic imperative of this campaign. We have seen that while the relationship may have been bruised in these events, the relationship has not been broken.
Characterize what bruised means.
There has been no call for the severing of the relationship between the United States and Afghanistan. We have to demonstrate that we're a reliable partner, and we can't permit, as tragic as that is, that event to define the relationship between the United States and Afghanistan.
Do you believe that Sergeant Bales is a casualty of war?
I'd prefer not to comment on that. Obviously, we have an investigation that still needs to be completed. and ultimately, through that investigation, the process of adjudicating this through the military justice system.
Let me just ask this. You are optimistic, it's fair to say, that this mission can be accomplished.
When I look into the eyes of our troops and I see their dedication to this mission, I am optimistic that we will accomplish this mission. This campaign is on track. The ANSF is moving into the lead. They want to be responsible, ultimately, for ending this insurgency. They want to be responsible for protecting the people from the Taliban.
What's interesting about General Allen in this conversation to me and what he says is, number one, he really thinks this mission can be accomplished. He thinks that the Afghan security forces will be able to stabilize Afghanistan. That's number one. He reminds us that there'll be more troops still there, some troops still there, to help them in some kind of supporting role. The more important thing, he says, is that he will make a recommendation to the president in September, after looking at what's happening on the ground, as to whether there'll be a further drawdown beyond the 68,000 who will be in place after they take the 20,000 from the surge.
It's amazing and it's so interesting to hear what he has to say. As you mentioned, he's so positive, and interesting to hear what he has to say too, because there's so much concern about whether or not the Afghans are in fact ready.
That is the question, as to whether the Afghans will be. And that's where the debate is. After this long, after 10 years of war, will the Afghans be able to do it on their own? And if they are not, is there anything that we can do between now and then?
And a lot of that test coming up, because we are now entering as what's known as the fighting season in Afghanistan. Charlie, great stuff. Thank you.